Hello and welcome back to another EDH deck tech video. Today I'm going to be showing the most recent list I've had for Chandra, Fire of Kaladesh. This is a somewhat 1v1 EDH deck. It is a little weird and strange. I've been piloting this for some time. If you check in my channel, there's a lot of different versions of this deck, some multiplayer, some thematic, and some not. I settled on the 1v1 deck and I have been playing it for about a year now, and I'm actually getting to the point where I'll be taking this apart. So before I do, I'm going to show the last version it had. Now Chandra, Fire of Kaladesh, is not really oftenly thought of as a good commander, although I think she's fun. She is a 3-mana 2/2 legendary shaman human, 1 red. And she has essentially the ability to turn into a planeswalker from her command zone. She has, whenever I cast a red spell, I untap her, and she has this ability to ping a player, as I could ping myself if I really needed to. And then if she has done 3 damage in this turn upon activation of this ping, she will then flip and transform into a planeswalker. The planeswalker being Chandra, Roaring Flame. She has 3 abilities starting at 4 loyalty. +1 is to shock a player, -2 is to shock a creature, and her ultimate, -7, is to give all opponents take 6 damage, and then each player dealt damage this way gets an emblem. I have to be careful because if that damage is somehow redirected to me, I would get the emblem. The emblem is, on their upkeep, they take 3. So this is an interesting commander to think about in 1v1. I do need to reiterate I'm playing traditional EDH rules, as we are all at 40 life still, and I have a soul ring in my deck and whatnot. I know the rules have changed for 1v1 drastically over the past 2 years, but for Chandra to become a legitimate commander with the goal of burning out the opponent, we have to have a lot of ways of protecting her as a planeswalker. Now this deck has 3 approaches that can be taken to win the game with, which we need to decide after we see our opening hand, like what cards we have to work with. When I am done showing the list, I will show what 3 routes the deck tries to take. This new from the vault flip thing is really hard to see sometimes. I of course love Russian cards, and I have a pre-release Russian, which the text is much smaller, but I mean it's still a very beautiful card. And of course they did a SDCC promo of this card as well with alternate artwork, but they made the text far too dark so you can barely read what it does. I keep all of these single-sleeved, double-sleeved with backs on them. I usually keep this as the one I have out and this as the one for the players to read, because this is what they want to double check more often than this. But let's stick the Chandra over here and I will go through the core parts of the deck. Now, as I said, this is a burn deck. So 23 cards here are actually burn spells. There are more coming up, but these are the core parts of the deck. Price of Progress doesn't kill creatures. It won't help save Chandra, but in a late game this can kill somebody. This is not a deck I would ever recommend playing in multiplayer. If you have more than one opponent, they will not allow Chandra to survive. But if you have more opponents, this becomes a very high damage output spell. But we have a bunch of just direct damage, something to an opponent, to a creature, or to an opponent and or a creature. We have Carbonize as a pet favorite. It's a 3-drop that exiles, if it dies, a creature that is. We have the Jet for a little bit of scry. We have a Fire Blast, which may be a free spell. Typically is in this deck. We have a Flame Javelin, which does 4 to a creature or player. It's an instant. We have Incinerate, again, more variants of Lightning Bolts, essentially. Same thing. This is a potential 5 damage. This is something we don't like seeing in our opening hand, and we don't have a scroll rack to get rid of it, but out of a 99 card deck, it is a very good chance we'll be miracling this. We have a Stagger Shock, which is a great tool to help flip Chandra, as this will count for a red spell cast on the next turn she's out. We have Char, which is a pretty good removal spell. A Skull Crack, which only hits players but does stop some life gain. I'll get more into this at the end of the video, but there are some matchups where you just do not bother playing this deck. Skull Crack is a nice way of stopping life gain, but sometimes it doesn't matter. We have Sudden Shock because sometimes it's fun to kill someone's secure Tribe Elder. We have Magma Spray to help exile. We have Pillar for Lame to help exile. Rift Bolt again is a nice way to help set up a Chandra flip if we don't have enough low costed burn spells in hand. We have an Arc Lightning to help clear out some little weenies. We have a Chain Lightning. This is again just another lightning bolt variant. It's a sorcery, the opponent may redirect. I'm really not a fan of these invocation cards as the text is just very hard to read. We have a few leftovers when this deck was highly Chandra themed, where I had a bunch of cards that had her in the artwork. Some are still worth playing, like Exquisite Firecraft. It's just a 4 damage burn spell. We have Flames of the Firebrand, which is essentially the same thing as Arc Lightning. This one just has Chandra in the artwork. We have Burn Away, which is a nice way of exiling a graveyard, but the 6 damage to a creature helps because a lot of commanders and cards and creatures you see in Commander are just bigger than our lightning bolts can kill. We have a Volcanic Fallout for a nice wipe. This also does 2 to a player, so we can redirect to a Planeswalker if need be. And Inferno is our biggest wipe. The reason this is in the deck over the other versions of this is an instant speed spell. Let's go through the rest of the utility spells next. Things that may not do damage, but can help us survive. We have a Chaos Warp. This can help remove whatever is the big issue at the time. A Braid is a damage to creature or artifact. Shattering Screed blows up a lot of artifacts. Fury Charm is another trick we can use with Chandra. While yes, it can be used to blow up an artifact, it could be used to give her +1/+1 trample and untap her. So what we would do is we would attack with our 2/2 Chandra. If they don't block, or if they block with something irrelevant, we would use this to give her trample, untap her. She would then be able to do 3 damage in combat. After combat, we can then tap her to ping and then flip her. So utility. We have more artifact destruction that burns and cantrips, and a few land destruction spells. Now this is where it gets a little tricky. Chandra likes to run under the radar if she can get away with it, so blowing up the opponent's lands is a good way to do this. We have a few generic ones like Stone Rain. Pillage can hit an artifact if we need to. We have Volcanic Offering, which could hit a non-basic and knock out a potential creature. Again, 7 damage to a creature is a very high number for a burn spell, and that's actually very good. Again, this is better in multiplayer, but in 1v1 this is creature and land destruction. We have Ruination because we have 3 non-mountain lands in our deck, and this is very good at sending back the opponent. Into the Maw of Hell, very similar to that the Volcanic Offering. This can hit a creature and a land. There's again a bit of a punishment stacks effect coming up that actually works really well with these cards. The Lava Ball Trap is great if someone fetches a land because they will have 2 lands that enter the battlefield, so we have a 5-mana instant opposed to an 8-mana instant. But this does 2 land destructions, and it does 4 to each creature, which we can hopefully flip our Chandra before she dies. Star of Extinction is another land hit plus creature damage. And let's go on to the last of the utility spells here. One thing that this deck likes to do is to double its spells when possible. So we have a Singleton Fork type effect. This only works on our spells, of course, but we have a Flashback to double it up. And we have a Reiterate. Again, this is just a generically very good card. We can use this to counter an opponent's counter spell, for example, or copy the ramp or whatever we want to do. We have a few more draw effects. Again, these are thematic because we have Chandra in the artwork of both. Discard 2 to draw 3, and exile the top 3 to play them. Again, this is something we usually want to hold up to. We have about 4 to 5 mana to work with. We have Grab the Reins and Word of Seizing. These are used to try to protect Chandra, actually. Once she flips, she's very vulnerable. We have no creatures in this deck to protect her, but if the opponent attacks us with 2 creatures, we can take 1 to block with. This can be used to take a giant creature and fling it at their face for damage. This could be used to take a Strip Mine and then to destroy one of their own lands with a Strip Mine, essentially being a 2 land destruction spell. We can also use this to take Planeswalkers and their emblems and whatnot. We have Brute Force. Again, this is a combat trick only for Chandra. When she is declared as an attacker, we can, if they try to block it with like a 4/4, for example, we can untap her from casting a red spell and make her a 5/5. Then she will be available after main phase or whatever after combat damage to tap and flip. And we have Overmaster. This is, again, just a pet favorite card. It helps us push through an important spell. If not, it just cantrips. And finally, we have Mizzix's Mastery. While this is not a Storm deck, this is probably the fairest deck you will ever see this card in. So we have 23 burn spells and all those other fun utility spells that we may be able to rebuy for 8 mana. The issue, of course, is this deck is a very low curved mana deck. If we have more than 5 lands and we keep drawing lands, we're probably in trouble. But if our graveyard has been filled, the game has been slowed down, or Chandra's been dealt with, or they've gained some life, this one spell will destroy them. I love Mizzix's Mastery, and overloading it in this deck is great because unlike my Storm decks where I play this spell, people don't scoot. They want to see the outcome of what happens. Now let's go through some artifacts next. Now there's a little bit of ramp in here. While I am in the process of moving away from this deck, I've already taken out the Lotus Petal and the Jeweled Amulet. Those are two very good cards to help you get a turn to Chandra. So if you have interest in this deck, I would pursue Jeweled Amulet, which is a 0-drop artifact. You can pay 1, tap it, and charge it, and save red mana on it. So on turn 2, you could have 3 mana. Lotus Petal, you just sack for mana. We have a Soul Ring and a Bauble. We do have a Valakut in here, so we can hold up Bauble for late game lightning bolts. We have a Sword of the Animist, which is very important actually. As I said, this deck, when you start the game, depending on your opening hand and what you work with, has a few routes you will want to choose to take. Sword of the Animist dictates one of those routes. Instead of becoming a flip the Chandra to the Planeswalker deck, we're going to use this to punch out lands and grind away by attacking with a 3/3. Again, I'll reiterate more later. Expedition Map is here to get the Valakut or the Thawing Glaciers. We have an Isochron Scepter. This is great with basically 20 cards in our deck. We have all sorts of lightning bolt variants that are instant speed, and we can keep using this over and over again to get them. We have Rings of Brighthearth. This is a fun trick when your commander is a Planeswalker. You can pay 2 to double her abilities, paying 2 to essentially do 4 damage to an opponent's face. This also works with a few other things like this, or the Expedition Map, or Myriad Landscape, or yeah, there's a few tricks this works with. We have Pyromancer's Gauntlet. So this seems really weird, but it's actually a very good spell. I'm not even that worried about the extra damage from the instant sorceries, while that does accumulate very quickly. The more important thing is the fact that it imps her damage by 2. So +1 to do 4 damage is a much quicker clock to burn out the opponent to get them in range of an easier lightning bolt kill or something. So this is classified as a damage enhancement effect. Pyromancer's Goggles, although, is just a fun double spell ability. I mean, this is going to get blown up very quickly. Opponents don't like the potential of what this card does and represents. In this deck, I mean, it's just going to double up some burn spell, but it's still very good. And finally, let's go through the last bit of the utility here. The most important, and I wouldn't say that, the best card for Chandra that I have found after playing this for a year actually is dual casting. It's an enchantment. What we are doing with dual casting is, again, this is something at the beginning of the game you have to make a choice of the path depending on what you have. If you see dual casting in your opening hand, you are not going to be flipping Chandra anytime soon. So she has this clever trick that is whenever you cast a red spell, you untap her. And this has the ability to give her another tap ability. Not this, but this whole paragraph here where I pay a red and I copy an instant or sorcery spell I control. Now, the way that this works, let me grab an example spell here just to play with. Let's say we have a Stone Rain. Now, we will cast a Stone Rain. Well, first things first, we'll have Chandra enchanted with this. We will have enough mana up, like 5 mana, for example. We will cast Stone Rain. Chandra will have an untap trigger that will go on the stack. We can then pay 1 red to tap Chandra to copy the spell. She will then resolve the untap trigger. We can then pay another red to copy the spell again. So, for example, in short, when Chandra is enchanted with dual casting, for every 2 red mana we have, we can not just double but triple our spell. So, for example, on turn 5, if I have 5 lands in play and Chandra and this is out, I can blow up 3 lands with just a Stone Rain. That is hard to emphasize how effective that is in EDH. Blowing up 3 lands on turn 5 is, yeah, it's pretty good. Another way to see this is if she's out and I have this on here and I have 3 red mana up, which is very easy because I've already had her in play. I can make 3 lightning bolts. That's 3 red mana to make 9 damage to an opponent. That's nearly a fourth of their life from one single spell. So, let's keep on trucking on here. Now, again, as I said, dual casting is probably my favorite card in this deck for Chandra to date. There are probably better things that need to be discovered. She just doesn't get a lot of attention, so it's hard to research. We have Seal of Fire. Again, this is thematic because we have Chandra, but this is actually a very good deterrent. It's a 1-drop, so we can help untap Chandra for just 1 mana, but we don't have to use the burn immediately. We can save this up for them attacking Chandra or something like that. We have advances and outpost siege. These are pseudo card advantage, like little draw effects. Unfortunately, we cannot get lands off of advances. And this is something we will never ever want to flip unless something really bad has happened. The card advantage is much better than a land that pays a bunch of mana to do some damage. There may be situations where you want to flip it, but I've never been in that situation yet. Now we also have Repercussions. Repercussions is a very powerful card. Like I said at the beginning of the game, you have to make a choice. If you see some specific type of damage enhancements, you want to play around them and specifically take that route and try to go to victory with it. Repercussions is another one of those choice cards. This is one where you need to flip Chandra and make sure she is not a creature. So if you do something like Starve Extinction, then you're going to do 20 damage to your opponent if they have just one single creature out. Again, this is typically seen with things like Blasphemous Act. 1v1 Blast Act is not actually good enough for the speed of which this deck tries to perform. But we also have Into the Maw of Hell. Into the Maw of Hell would do... here we go. We would destroy one of their lands and do 13 to a creature. If this is in play, this spell would then do 13 damage to that creature's controller. So again, this is very powerful. This is a game-ending spell. We have to be careful when to deploy this. We don't want to expose it too early, especially if we can't make immediate use of it. Then we have Sulfuric Vortex. Again, a deck tends to suffer against specific opponents. If the opponent is playing like a Traxa or a Loro, where they're automatically gaining life, don't even bother playing this deck to scoop up your cards. But I mean, they may have some of their life gain in the deck. And this is also just a consistent damage loss that you don't want to redirect, of course, to your Chandra, but you could to them. Then we have other typical damage enhancements, the doublers. Making that single lightning bolt do 6 damage is much more relevant than, just 3. And we have a pair of other Chandras. These were not originally in the deck until the recent rule change, where you can have more than one Chandra as long as it's a different type. The only one I, again, have already taken out was the Torch of Defiance, the other 4-drop Chandra that is good for card advantage. Torch of Defiance 100% needs to be in this deck. I just needed her for Modern, so she's not currently in here. I would replace that one for her. Now, this one is a very good card to fill in your graveyard if you're digging for that Mizzix Mastery, and actually attacking for 6 damage is very good as well. So these are probably the Torch of Defiance, this, and this are the 3 best Chandras. Finally, let's go to the lands. And there's not a bunch of special things going on here. We have the Married Landscape. It's a good 2-for-1, a nice turn 1 play. And it works very good with Valakut. We can hold up the Married Landscape and do 6 damage to a creature or to an opponent instead. Then we have the Thawing Glaciers, which is a very slow card advantage. The issue with burn decks, especially in EDH, where your opponent has 40 life, is running out of gas, just running out of things, and drawing land after land after land does suck. But this is something we can double up with, like the Rings of Bright Hearth, and get 2 lands in play, and yeah. The rest of them are 33 basic mountains. But yeah, this is the current, and most likely the final Chandra list I have right now. And again, as I said at the beginning of a game, whenever I pilot this against one opponent, I have to make a choice of what I'm going to try to do in that game. Let me grab those key parts. Essentially, in my opening hand, I need to see if I have any one of these types of cards. And that will tell me the path I will try to take to victory. For example, if I have Sword the Animist, I'm not going to deploy any of my burn spells. Instead, I'm going to equip Chandra, and I'm going to keep attacking with Chandra for 3 damage. If they get a blocker, then I will kill the blocker with the burn spells, even if I have to 2-for-1 myself, because every single turn I'm getting ahead with lands. I will try to hold all those burn spells until I can just blow them all out at once. Similar to like when you play burn in Modern, and your opponents are playing a lot of counter spells, you hold up all your burn spells until you overwhelm their counter spells, because your burn spells typically cost less than a counter spell. The next option we have is if we see some kind of damage enhancement, like a damage doubler or the Pyromancer's Gauntlet, for example. If we see anything like this, our goal is to immediately and quickly flip Chandra into a Planeswalker. We want to use our burn spells to protect her when we can, but just keep on plussing her, shocking the opponent, thus doing 4. That rate of burn really drops them very quickly. And again, this is hard to describe without actually seeing this game out. Another route we'll see is a sort of punishment effect. If we see something like this, then we definitely want to flip Chandra, but we want to focus our burn spells on the opponent's creatures because this will redirect the damage to them as well. We are taking a much more defensive approach instead of just throwing out burn spells when we can. We may even be allowing Chandra to take a hit in combat because we just want to continually burn out their creatures over time. And finally, if we see something like dual casting, again, we're not going to be flipping Chandra, we're going to be enchanting her, and we're going to be holding our burn spells till we have the ability to double up on this untap, or this double effect using her untap trick. Again, how that works, she is enchanted. If you cast a red spell, there's an effect that goes on the stack to untap her, even if she's already untapped. So you then would pay 1 red in response to that effect to copy that spell. You allow the untap to resolve, you pay another red to copy the spell again. And I mean, that's, as I said, if you are doing a lightning bolt for 3 red mana, you're doing 9 damage. And that's assuming you don't have something like Furnace or Wrath out or more. Though the best games for this, the best games for Chandra, are when you can start building multiple parts. If you have like a Furnace and a Repercussions, or a Furnace and a dual casting, or things like that, or just get really good, or a Sword of the Animus with a Valakut out. There are small interactions that stack and can make this get very gross very quickly. But yeah, this is Chandra. I have loved her for quite some time. I'm really not a fan of this artwork of her. I really like this picture of her as a child, although you can barely see it. But I also do not like this artwork. I much prefer this artwork of her Planeswalker form. I do hope they revisit these flip origin Planeswalkers again. I know that most people just think of Jason, maybe not Nisa, and the rest are kind of forgettable. But ever since this one got printed, I mean, I love her. If you haven't seen my channel, I have about 5 other Chandra videos up. So, but yeah, any feedback or opinion, definitely let me know. Thanks.